Looks like we're going to have to do this a little bit different today. So, having to, because the internet went down, I'm going to have to record this and then upload this. So, the training for today is, let's see, which way? Okay, we're going to be talking about managing the dichotomy of healing. And so we're going to go through various aspects of the healing journey and being able to understand, depending on where you're coming from, will dictate how your healing journey will go. And so I will share some of my experience, strength, and hope in order for you guys to be able to take something away from this training and actually implement it to your life. And so I'm going to share a lot on various different things. If this is your first time joining me, my name is Tina. I'm a happiness coach and I help people and business owners be able to transition and deal with the emotional roller coaster of running a business. And I do this by bringing a trauma awareness approach and a change management approach to what I teach. So we're going to start with strengths and weaknesses. So when I've been through a lot of challenging experiences, I have had situations in my past with the abuse that I've gone through. Um, and there are various things where when I first started my healing journey, sorry, just taking a breath here because having the internet goes down kind of throws me off a little bit and I'm trying to get back on track. So, saying that stuff out loud, getting through it. All right. So, the strengths and weaknesses. Um, what I had learned in my healing journey is things that I thought were my strengths sometimes ended up being my weaknesses. Some things that I thought were my weaknesses actually ended up being my strengths. And learning to understand the dichotomy of it is, where is it on the sliding scale? And for those of you that are not sure what a dichotomy is, that is basically it. It's a sliding scale of, like, imagine like from 0 to 10, right? Where are you at on the scale, right? Or so this being 0, this is, well, balance. So this is the negative side, this is balance, this is positive side. So it's somewhere on the spectrum, but you can't ever actually fully get rid of it. It's not either, it's not like a binary option where it's either a 0 or 1 or a yes or a no. It's not that. It can be, well, sometimes it depends. And the thing is most things end up falling into that it depends category, right? And I think this happens a lot in abuse and healing from the abuse that you've been through. So I will talk about. So let's go through a couple of examples. So let's look at strengths and weaknesses. How many people would think that loyalty is a strength? That's a good characteristic, a good quality to have. And I definitely feel like it is a good quality, but at what point would loyalty actually become toxic and something that is not good? Well, if you are loyal to somebody who is being abusive to you and does not have your best interest at heart, then that is a problem, and that is not taking care of ourselves, right? And we learn that stuff based on how we've been treated. Now, loyalty might have been something that was drilled into you, that, you know, it's so important to be loyal. And the thing is anything that might violate that, including standing up for ourselves, could be a problem of not wanting to break that loyalty, right? That is a good quality to have when you say that I'm a loyal person. But if you're being loyal to the wrong people, then you're being foolish, right? And you can get hurt. So it's understanding where is that dichotomy, where are you on that scale, and who, and loyal in relation to who, right? So being able to understand that, and having to re-examine what I thought. It's like, well, I thought I couldn't speak up about certain things because that meant I would be disloyal, and therefore it goes against one of my values of who I feel that I am. So part of the healing process is starting to reevaluate, especially if that abuse came from your primary caregivers, your family members, the people that you love and trust. It's a very different situation if that abuse came from outside. Not to say it's any less, but there's different dynamics that come into play, right? And it gets a little bit more confusing and a little bit harder to untangle this stuff of being able to understand that. So going through the process of examining, yes, I'm a loyal person, but there are circumstances where, for my own survival, for my own benefit, my own well-being, not just an opportunist benefit. We're talking of for my own mental health, for my own physical health, for my own sexual well-being, that there have to be some sort of limits on loyalty, of where does that fall off, and understanding where those limits are, where those boundaries are around that loyalty, that it can't just be, oh, you said that you were loyal, especially when you are dealing with narcissistic or abusive type people that will take that loyalty, twist it to get you to do the things that they want you to do, even if it's not in your own best interest. So being able to understand that your strengths, those good qualities, those good characteristics can be used against you, and understanding how can those qualities be used against you, and being able to evaluate critically for yourself is a way to reclaim your power for anything that you have been betrayed in for the past. So understanding that while loyalty can be a strength, understanding also when can it be turned against me? When can that become a weakness for me? And understanding the difference, and understanding our own tolerance and our own shortcomings in this area is important, because this is why we do the inner work, because without us understanding it ourselves, going, oh, that's not enough, that's too far, and knowing where that balance is for us. And it changes person to person or situation to situation, depending on the criteria that's coming in, the data that we're processing, and how we're seeing that. And that's a whole other topic of how we're seeing that, because what we've been through colors our perception of the experiences that we're having, or the behaviors that we see from others. And somebody may see, so I'll give an example. I was in a wedding party years ago, and with a friend and stuff like that, and there were certain unspoken rules that they I was being measured on, that I didn't know of whether or not I was deemed as a loyal friend. And I unknowingly made some mistakes, because I didn't grow up in the same environment that she did. And so I ended up getting kicked off of the wedding party, not because I did anything blatant, but because I didn't meet her loyalty criteria. And so I'm not blaming her or anything else, but there are certain circumstances that happen that, from her perspective, she was measuring a certain level of loyalty. From me, I was giving a certain level of loyalty that I felt that was showing up, being accommodating, all of that kind of stuff. But because I wasn't standing up, I wasn't um, calling some people out and stuff like that, it ends up that I am not being loyal. So there's different ways of how is this value being evaluated. Okay, so understanding those kind of things. There's strengths and our weaknesses, and understanding that there's a balance. Let's look at the quality of stubbornness. Now, most people would, oh, that's a little hard for you guys to read, but it's on there. Okay, quality of stubbornness. Stubbornness, well, I know I got called that quite a bit, and it was always in a negative way. And yes, that can be a negative quality, and it could be harmful to us if we're stubborn with the wrong things. But if we are stubborn with the right things, and we're stubbornly sticking to something that we know is true and that we know will work, and it is one of the qualities of being an entrepreneur, you have to have some sort of level of stubbornness with you in order to stick things through. But you also have to balance that out, because if you're stubborn for too long, too much in a particular area, you could end up shooting yourself in the foot. So it's good to stick to your guns, but at some point you have to know when is enough enough, right? It's no different than, winners never quit kind of thing. But you also cannot be so stupid that you run right off a cliff and say, well, I thought you said you weren't going to quit. It's like, but you would have had me run off a cliff. Yeah, but you're a quitter, right? And those are the kind of gaslighting techniques that narcissists will use, of like, yeah, but you didn't do this and you didn't do that. So understanding our strengths and weaknesses, and understanding when something that, because we know inside when we've been holding on too long or not holding on too long, whatever it is, right? We know the difference with us, and sometimes we disregard what we've been through. Sometimes we're not given enough data. We think and we assume that people are operating under the same qualities and characteristics that we are. And then we get upset when we see that their qualities or characteristics are different than what we thought. We are not evaluating the same quality using the same tools, the same framework, right? So this is what we need to understand. It can get pretty confusing. This is why it's important to be able to at least do our own inner work, because there are too many other variables out there of understanding, well, if I said, give me something that is green, right? And I go here and I go, here you go, it's green. And you're like, no, that's got like too much blue in it. I was looking for like a lime green. It's like, okay, well, there's various shades of green, right? Or various shades of gray kind of thing. So this is what we're talking about, and it's a matter of clarity. So we have to find that clarity for ourselves and know where that barometer is of what works for us and where our limits and boundaries are when it comes to our strengths and our weaknesses. And something that somebody else may criticize us for and say, well, that's a weakness, it can actually be a strength in the right circumstance. So knowing that even our strengths can be used against us, and our weaknesses can actually become our greatest strengths. So learning how to move that scale and slide that to where it needs to be for the circumstance, and being able to understand that is part of the healing journey. And that applies both in personal life and in your business. So this other piece that I want to talk about, so managing the dichotomy of healing. And so we're going to go a little bit into the 5 love languages. So you guys have seen these before. These are not mine, obviously. But let's see. This way. There we go. 5 love languages. And I think that's backwards. Okay, ran out of recording time on that one. Okay, and the screen is backwards here. Let's see if I can fix that. Nope. That went the wrong way. Okay. No. Okay, gonna have to just go with the laptop then. The phone is not working. Tech issues all around. All right, so let's talk about words of affirmation, physical touch, acts of service, quality time, and gifts. Okay, so we've got these five love languages, and usually people have probably 2 to 3. You can go check out 5 love languages, do a quiz, it'll tell you what they are, what's most important to you. Personally, I think all 5 love languages, all humans need all 5 languages. So, and there's varying degrees. And oftentimes, I think our abuse ends up happening on a spectrum for certain areas. So, when we think of words of affirmation, right, and we think of, positive feedback and telling you you're a good boy, good girl, whatever it is, and we get that positive reinforcement, that is over here. So we're good. Okay. If we grew up in an abusive household, we might have been told we're nothing, we're a piece of shit, we're worthless, we're whatever. So we're bad over here, right? And so understanding that this, if we grow up in this kind of home where we're criticized heavily, we're talked down to, then all of a sudden words of affirmation are going to be like gold to us, right? That's going to be something that's a rare commodity when we grow up in this kind of environment. Or if we're in a work environment where we're always talked down to, then when we get into a work environment that we're given positive reinforcement, that is going to be an environment that we want to stay in, that we're going to want to be in. Now, if you were manipulated and you were told all kinds of good things, but then those good things didn't end up lining up, then we might be a little bit gun shy. We might be a little bit resistant to, let's go over to this side. We might be resistant to receiving positive affirmations. We might be skeptical. We may not believe it, especially if every time that you were told positive, nice things, it end up turning out badly. So depending on how we're wounded, there might be a different healing journey for each of us, right? So learning to see that, oh, just because somebody tells me something nice doesn't mean that they're trying to manipulate me. It means that, oh, they actually genuinely meant it. They weren't trying to do anything nefarious, right? Just like, well, every time somebody criticizes you doesn't mean they're out to get you all the time and that they're trying to hurt you. Sometimes negative feedback is important for our growth process. So understanding what areas make us sensitive and where we are on that particular dichotomy, that sliding scale, is going to be part of how we actually heal. So this applies to physical touch as well. So all human beings need physical touch. And yet I often hear, I'm not a touchy-feely person. Okay, that tells me you have been wounded in some way that touch is uncomfortable for you, because all humans, in fact, they've done studies where with monkeys and things like that, where they gave them all of the requirements that they needed for life. They had food, they had water, they had shelter, but there was no physical touch. No other monkeys, the handlers weren't allowed to touch them, and those monkeys ended up dying. So we need that physical touch. We need that bond. We need that energy. And so if we're not touchy-feely kind of people, then there's usually been some sort of um, wound there, some sort of behavior that has deterred us from wanting that physical touch. Maybe that was sexual abuse. Maybe it was physical abuse. Maybe it was just an overbearing parent of they were smothering you with love and good attention and stuff like that. But to you, it felt too much. It felt overwhelming. So you might be like, stay back, get off of me. I don't need any of this, right? Um, or you might have been so starved for physical love and attention that your way of adapting was to get as much physical attention as you possibly can. And maybe you erred on the side of being promiscuous or super touchy-feely and like always wanting that love and attention and not being able to read other people's interactions of what feels good for them and what doesn't, right? So you might be a little bit on that other side. So understanding where are you on that scale, and who, of course, especially with physical, is going to change. Now, if it's, say, a stranger in a grocery store or something like that, you might have a wider energy field that you need around you. It's like, no, you're standing too close to me kind of thing. Whereas somebody else, somebody that you care for, that you are physically intimate with, that you love, you're going to have a much closer physical proximity to each other. So understanding now acts of service. Again, so dichotomy of healing. Where are you? Were you always having to be forced to perform acts of service to prove your love? And you got to the point where you're now resentful. So now you don't want to do any of those things, that you are resistant to having to prove or demonstrate your love through acts of service. Or were you guilted into, after all I've done for you, kind of thing, right? Have you endured that kind of abuse? And how did it affect you? And so you see that acts of service, if they come across as a statement of resentment or obligation, you may not be willing to receive an act of service from somebody. You may not be willing to perform acts of service for others for fear of being indebted to that other person, and or that it being weaponized against you. So this is how we have to look at how, when we've experienced abuse, how was love weaponized against us? How was it used to harm us? And so we start looking at those different things of, I know for acts of service, I struggle with being able to receive from others because of what I had gone through. And I'm not saying that this is, when I say because of what I've gone through, please don't take that as me saying that that does not mean you have to, you can just be who you are and that is good enough and never change anything, even if you know it's wrong. No, if it's not working for you, if it is causing problems for you, then you will be called to change and you will get uncomfortable enough that you will want to change. So if you are always on the spectrum where I never ever receive anything from anybody else, then if I don't let myself do that, then I am blocking people from loving me. I am blocking um, the ability to receive. And that is a very negative thing, because that will lead to a lot of resentment, that'll lead to a lot of fear, that'll lead to a lot of anger. all of those kind of things. So being able to heal that is important. Now, you don't want to swing to the other side where you expect everybody to do everything for me kind of thing. You don't want to go down that road because then you're seen as selfish, right? And I got called selfish a lot. So to compensate for that, I turned and wouldn't receive because I was so afraid of being called selfish. And so understanding how were we wounded, and then what is the journey to actually go down the path to heal that, to balance things out. And this is something that will never be in perfect balance. It's a pendulum swing. You're gonna swing from one side to the other and back, right? And then you pass balance as you go by that. And so understanding how were you wounded in that particular area? What does that look like for you? And the reason we understand that is we look at that to understand where are our potential weaknesses that can be used against us, right? If you are an overgiver, then you're going to be susceptible to people that are overtakers. And if you're an overtaker, then you are going to end up causing harm to other people, and then you'll wonder what happened, right? You're going to wonder why things went wrong. And we have to learn to balance those things out. Okay. Quality time. So quality time is another one. So for me, this one is something that is important, right? It's not quantity time, it is quality time. And because I was used to extreme long periods of, my mom was a single mom and she worked a full-time job and she was also a superintendent of a building. So I was, as a young kid, spent a lot of time alone. And that's technically called neglect. Okay? That being said, I, as an adult, understand that. It's not like I'm looking at my mom and still like, oh, I hate you because you neglected me. No, I've done enough work that I'm like, okay, I understand that. I understand the impacts of it. I also understand where she was coming from on her perspective, right? Um, Now, you can't jump to that. You have to go through the stages of grieving and understanding the pain that you went through and going through that. And those stages are, first of all, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then acceptance. So those are the 5 stages of healing or grieving. And so when we discover these wounds, these things that we've gone through in childhood, we need to understand and be able to identify how did that impact us, and then how do we move forward with that, right? So quality time, when I think of this one, I'm used to a high amount of time alone. Somebody else might have, well, no, they need a lot more time. They expect that kind of thing. So good, bad, or otherwise, somebody demanding more of my time might seem threatening to me, right? So being aware of that my threshold is maybe over here, somebody else's threshold is over here, and how do we work this out? How do we balance this so that both people get their needs met, right? And understanding maybe their quality time, maybe how they dealt with it is that they need so much more of that quality time together that they're spending with each other. Somebody else may not need as much. And so these aren't always like straight up abuse kind of things. Sometimes these are just sliding scale ratios that need to be adjusted and modified and tweaked, and that comes from understanding our own selves and doing our own inner work, our own reflection of how did things affect me from my childhood. Maybe you wouldn't even called it abuse. I didn't until I started looking things up before I started doing some of the coaching. And then I looked at it, I'm like, oh, well, shit. Really? I was supposed to receive more attention than I got? Oh, damn. Hmm. So learning to find that balance and learning to see where that affected us, and only for the purpose of understanding, is that still holding us back in our lives today? If it's not and it's working for you, then you don't have to fix it. If it's causing a problem for you, then that's where we need to look at things. Or if it's causing a problem for the people around you, or you're not getting the results from the relationships that you want, you don't feel the same satisfaction, whether it's a personal relationship, family, friends, significant other, or if it's a business relationship, our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our vendors, whatever it is, if we're not getting that appropriate give and take, that balance, then there may be some things that are along here that end up impacting, right? So maybe your employees are not feeling like you're spending enough time with them or paying enough attention to them. That's a quality time thing, right? Sometimes it's just a matter of being around. They don't actually need anything. And if you're only focused on, well, I'm here if you need me, and they're like, but I don't need anything specific. I just need to know that you're around, right? And there could be some abandonment wounds with some of the people that are on your team, and they just need to know that you're available just in case. And that could come from something as simple as they were left alone, right? So sometimes they need those words of reassurance, words of affirmation. They just need to know that you're physically around somewhere, right? Any of those kind of things, right? And then we can get into the fifth one, which is gifts. And so sometimes for me, gifts are a danger warning sign. So the don't take candy from a stranger kind of thing. Don't take candy from anybody because usually there's some sort of bribe or manipulation or something that's going on, and there's a price to pay for it, right? So that is kind of what I grew up in. That was one of the main things that the abuser tried to use. And then, so when I blocked off that, then it escalated to other different things of, you know, words of affirmations got withdrawn and criticism increased. Physical touch was a problem as well. But let's go into the gifts. The funny thing is I love to give gifts. I'm not so good at receiving them. I become uncomfortable. And that was something that I actually had to start learning to do when I was in the recovery process. Back when I was first doing this stuff, I had to learn to just say thank you when somebody gave me a gift, because one of the things that would happen is I became very, very anxious when somebody gave something to me, whether they gave me their time, they gave me attention, they gave me anything. It made me extremely uncomfortable, and I would be frantic trying to give back more and trying to overdo those kind of things so that, and it comes back, I was so afraid of being called selfish that I would overgive and I would overdo things. And yeah, so those are things that I had to learn to kind of balance that out. And the funny thing is, as an adult, sometimes one of the things that I will do, and I'm not good at receiving gifts, but I'm really good at giving gifts, because gifts were some of the things of the family dynamic love languages. We weren't big on words, but if, you know, grandma gave you a gift or she gave you some money or something like that, then that was their way of saying, I love you, right? So some of those things is like understanding what do people value? Some people want those gifts. Some people, that is something very important to them. It's very tangible, right? So I'm great at giving gifts, not so good at receiving them. I've gotten better, but it is something that you have to understand where you're at in the journey, right? Of where do you need to heal? Maybe for you, if somebody doesn't give you a gift, they don't come with a present, right? Because I've had some people do that. It's like you get invited over for dinner. If you don't bring a gift, then that is looked down upon, right? That they see it as you don't actually care, you don't love them, blah, blah, blah. And is it only the first time that you bring the gift, or is it every time? You know, and there's sometimes these are unwritten rules, these are unspoken rules, and finding out where is the balance that works. So a lot of times too, I will, I've done this several times with people that I work with, that, and I think it comes from us, because I know how important their kids are to them, and I acknowledge that and I see that, and I will give gifts to my coworkers or employees or stuff like that for their kids. And that's a twofold thing. One, I know their kids are important to them, and two, it is because kids are something that I always wanted and never got to get that gift, right? So um, I can appreciate both sides. So wanting to be able to, because I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have the ability to give gifts to my kids because I don't have kids. So giving gifts to other people's kids is a way for me to acknowledge that I understand that their kids are important to them, and that um, they're important to me, and I like to give those kind of gifts, right? For not expecting anything in return, but just to, as an acknowledgement, as an expression of love, right? Because everything is either a cry for or an expression of love. So yeah, and I've done that multiple times. Coworkers, bosses, all kinds of things. And I'm just thinking of, wow, I didn't realize it just till now, just how many times I do that. But, and I've gotten a lot better at receiving gifts. And knowing that some people really express that as their way of expressing their love, their appreciation for you. And being able to be a good gift receiver is just as important as being a good gift giver. So, and depending on what we've been through in our past, we may have a different dichotomy that we have to manage. Are good gifts good for you, or are they bad for you, right? Where every time you were given a gift, something bad happened? Was every time that you tried to give gifts, things went bad, right? So, like, you know, there's been times where it's like, oh, I gave the gift, but everything was criticized, right? And words of affirmations, right? It was, where did you have your wounding? Will dictate a different path of where you have to correct those behaviors. Being aware of this stuff is important, not so much of having to look back in our childhood, but being aware of other people, of how they might have been impacted with things. So if you give somebody a gift and they seem uncomfortable, or they don't show the correct amount of appreciation that you would expect, maybe they're not as excited. Maybe you're like, do they even like it? I don't know what's going on, right? So there could be something like that. So people's reactions to things that you think are good things might be because it's rubbing on something that was either some sort of wounding, some sort of, they're uncomfortable with it. Just like I had mentioned with the physical touch thing, right? You know, it's like, I'm not a touchy person. I won't, you know, I don't like going for a massage therapist, or like, you know, physiotherapy or anything like that they need, right? Because they're so uncomfortable with touch. there's a wounding there. There's definitely a wounding there. So being able to understand these things and where you are on that scale, how to adjust it appropriately for ourselves and for the people that are around us. So this kind of awareness is really important. Um, Going back to gifts, it just kind of popped into my head of business stuff. I had gone through phases of business where, it was normal to give gifts, and especially if you were in sales or whatever, or the sales guys would come in, they'd give you gifts. And then it got to the point where we actually had to refuse any gifts. And that made the salespeople's jobs extremely difficult because we weren't allowed to receive any gifts for certain things. And I remember it's because it influences our decisions too greatly, or the perception that it influenced our decision. Because it may or may not have influenced the decision, but somebody else may look at it going, well, you only awarded the business to that person because they did this, they took you out for dinner, they bought you this, they bought you that, they gave you these things, right? And so understanding that different people have different perspectives about the same thing. It may have been given in good intent with no strings attached, no issues, but receiving it could also influence, because when we receive things from others, it does, there's a law of reciprocity that ends up happening. So sometimes as you grow in your corporation, as you grow in your business, you may have to implement some rules to kind of go, okay, I don't want, Bob's decision making skills influenced by whether or not that vendor gave us a gift, right? Or took us out to a ball game and bought seats or something like that, right? So you have to be aware of how these things, even if it's not so-called trauma, it can be there's some sort of problem that ended up happening. So if you don't like the words wounding, you don't like trauma, you don't like that, we'll switch it to more business appropriate terms of, okay, there was a problem that happened before. How we're going to solve this problem is we're not going to accept any more gifts, right? Or there's a cost threshold, right? Yes, you can let the vendor take you out for dinner, but you have to, you know, be talking business. It can't have alcohol, or there's all kinds of rules, structures, these different things, and they're all designed to solve problems that happened before because of those behaviors, right? So understanding where did those wounds, traumas, problems happen before, and how are they being corrected, and then have they been corrected so much that they went from it being a good thing to, instead of being balanced, it's now flipped over to this side and now needs to be pulled back and go, okay, maybe we can accept a couple of things. Maybe we can accept donations for the Christmas party, or we can accept, whatever. Uh, Smaller amounts if it's under $100 or something like that, right? So you can balance things out, because imagine you're dealing with somebody that will not accept any gifts from you, and you won't accept any gifts from them. How do you uh, interact with each other? How do you exchange love with each other, or business, right? So same thing. So you have to be able to understand the balances between the two. Where 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 have there been wounds? Where have there been problems before? How did you react to those wounds or problems? And then how did you correct that situation? How did you overcorrect? Or did you not correct and it still needs to be corrected? So understanding these things is the pathway for healing and recovery, and this matters for your happiness, the happiness of those around you, and the happiness of your personal life and your professional life. So if you guys made it to this point, please make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125, and you can watch the replays. You'll get notified when I've uploaded them. So, or in cases like this where I had to do the live, behind the scenes and not live on the social media platforms because the internet decided to be a pinhead. So, with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up, and you have a great night. Bye.